Tonloc in Texas wants to clear up some confusion.
All right. Tonloc in Texas. You're live with Eric and V. Hello?
Hello?
Hey, what do you want to talk about?
How are you guys doing, by the way? There was a thing I wanted to touch on about the nature of how things are defined. You know, when I was calling earlier, and there seemed to be some confusion about how things are defined, whether you're talking about defining things into existence. You know that caller?
Oh, yeah.
It was the very first caller.
Yeah, the problems that we had there, just to refresh, just to make sure, was the problem I had was that existence is not a characteristic that you can give a thing, right? It's not an attribute. And then your disagreement was...
The disagreement, it was less of a disagreement and more just of a clarification that when you talk about something being a necessary being, part of that necessity is existence. So to say that I'm talking about a necessary being, but not talking about existence is kind of like saying I'm talking about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but not peanut butter.
Yeah.
One of your, I don't know if it was someone in the stream, in the text chat somewhere, you had pointed out that one of them said that when they're talking about things that are fictional and assigning properties to those things, then in the fictional context, those things exist in that way. You remember that?
Yeah, they exist as a fiction, right? I can hold...
The concept exists.
Yeah, I can hold a book that has, that, like, we're talking about Lord of the Rings. I can actually go and get the book and I can read it.
Right. So full disclosure, I actually hold the same view that the gentleman who called earlier holds. And I think the issue is this. When we're talking about giving a definition for something, what we want to do so we avoid confusions like these is we want to distinguish between things that we're dealing with in a fictional context and things that we're dealing with in the ontological context in the real world that we live in. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Although I just want to clarify, because fiction ontologically exists, right? So when we're talking about fiction, we're talking, if we're talking about, just stories, those stories exist as stories. They're just not real people, but they are stories that exist.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're not flip-flopping between those, because there could be a lot of confusion there.
Right. I am absolutely 100% willing to admit that the ontological argument, the modal ontological argument for God gets us to the concept of God existing. But absolutely. The issue is that it doesn't get us to God actually existing.
Or necessarily existing, because you could have a universe where the concept of God does not exist.
Right.
Does that help clarify a bit?
What I'm getting at is fiction is a subset of human imagination. So when we're talking about humans imagining things, you can say in the ontological sense, humans are imagining things, but the things that they're imagining, those things that they're referring to, don't exist in our ontological circle, in our world.
Oh, in reality, the same way. I think we're on the same page. All right, go ahead.
In other words, just to give a definition for something is not to talk it into existence in the same sort of context. You can say fiction is a subset of the human imagination, but no one would ever rationally confuse that with ontologically existing, like there's really a unicorn or there really is a three-headed flying spaghetti monster or something like that. Nobody would ever think that, right?
Yes, but here's the problem. Here's the rub. That's where that confusion comes in. And if we're super, super clear, we can get through it. And so here's the clarification. I can describe fiction, right? I can talk about a fictional apple. I'm not actually holding an apple, but I can describe that apple. And that fiction exists. True. But for me to describe a non-existent thing, I can't. I have nothing to put it onto. In my mind, I'm imagining a wire mesh in the shape of an apple. And then upon that, I put the flavor and the color and the ripeness and all of those characteristics of that apple go on to this mesh of existence. And so the problem that we had, or at least that I had there, was that when the prior caller was defining that God, in the definition is the word necessary. And that's...
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It sounded like you were going to respond to that.
Oh, yeah. So when we're talking about God, all we need to understand is that we're not at the current time putting it into like real and actual ontological existence. What we're trying to do is we're trying to formulate a groundwork in which we can agree on something so there's not confusion in the issue. Like if my definition of God is different than yours, then we're just going to be talking past each other.
Absolutely.
So that's all we're doing when we're trying to give a definition for God. We haven't, made the bridge to, does this thing ontologically exist in our world just yet? You see what I'm saying?
Right. And I think where we were going, and maybe where there was a little bit of confusion, was I think that that's what our first caller was trying to do. But that caller was presenting a version of God that we disagreed with. So we were saying, okay, well, we understand that this is the version you're presenting, to maybe find that common ground. We can't meet there because of these issues.
And then when we brought up the issues, I don't think they were understanding that those issues need to be clarified, or we need to be able to get through that in order to continue.
Right. So I fully agree. We need to make sure we are agreeing on definitions and meeting in a common ground. It's just that both sides need to agree with everything being said in that space before we can start bringing in other stuff.
It's the same reason why when somebody, presents arguments, and they give the different premises, if you disagree on a premise, then that's where it kind of falls apart.
Yeah, well, like I can agree with you guys that unicorn is a horse-like figure with one horn on its head, a majestic type of a figure, this, that, and the third. I'm pretty sure we can both agree on that. But we're not going to say that this thing has ontological existence in our world. At best, it only has a subset. It's only a subset of the human imagination. It doesn't exist in any real defined, concrete sense in our world.
No, but so what you're doing is you're taking a piece of modal logic and applying it to a different argument, but that modal logic needs the rest in order to be
right, which is that necessary piece.
Yeah.
So if we said, okay, so unicorns, hypothetically, whether or not they ontologically exist, have horns and are sparkly and poop rainbows.
Okay.
But the definition of have horns includes horns have to exist. Anything with a horn necessarily has to exist in the real world. So we can agree, oh yeah, they have horns, cool. If we don't know that you are going to be using that extra piece and horns also have to exist and everything attached to them necessarily exist as well, you've just defined a unicorn into existence, right? And so the problem with the caller prior was that he didn't think that we knew that existence was a part of necessary. So he was trying to get us to agree to a necessary God, and then was going to pull in the piece, well, if it's necessary, then it has to exist. Yeah. We already got there, and we weren't willing to grant that. So we were like, let's, just cut the crap and address that issue right up front.
Tonloc, I'm sure you know how to determine whether or not something is necessary, because the last caller said it. Do you know how to determine whether or not something's necessary?
Well, that would be a worldview question. Like I said, I come from the same basic line of reasoning that he does.
Yeah, it's not a worldview question. There's actually an answer to it. Mm-hmm. Do you know how something is necessary?
Well,
what's the test?
Well, it actually is, and I can explain to you why.
So I will tell you what it is. It has to do with, is there any possible universe where it not being true is absolutely nonsensical? Or let me try that again. I'll use an example, square circles. Is there any possible universe where square circles exist? If that does not make sense, yeah, the impossibility of the contrary. Whoa. Thank you. That's the right way of saying it. The impossibility of the contrary. Okay, cool. So is there could you conceive of a possible universe where God does not exist?
Well, a possible universe would only be secured by the thing that grounds what's possible and what's not. So
it sounds like you're saying, no, you cannot imagine a universe.
Concrete. It would have to be something ultimately concrete.
I get that. I'm just putting brackets around that so that I can make sure that I'm understanding your answer. No, you cannot understand or cannot make sense of a universe existing without a God. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
So impossibility of the contrary. That's the test for something being necessary. Is it possible that in any conceivable universe, a God could not exist or doesn't exist?
Well,
I'm not saying the ones where it does. I'm saying the ones where it doesn't. Is there any possible conceivable universe where that God does not exist?
Like the contrary is something is like undefined. Like what?
All right, so the contrary is not the claim, right? So A or not A. So if the claim is God exists, then the contrary would be not God exists. So let's plug not God exists in. Is there any conceivable universe where God does not exist, or the claim God exists is not true?
Well, sir, A and not A is only in and of itself an abstraction. It doesn't refer to what is the contrary of that.
So that's a dodge. If you want to get there, you got to answer my question. Try again. Is it possible to conceive of a universe where God does not exist?
Again,
yes or no?
Worldview question.
So no. What you're seeking to do is invalidate me so that you don't have to answer. Tonloc.
See, here's the problem.
Funky Cold Medina. Listen, dude.
Sir, if you say it's not a worldview question,
no, it's not.
Invoke something like pluralism. That it could be.
No. That's not how modal ontology works. If you're going to use it correctly.
It's purely logic at this point. So if we can agree that logic is a thing that exists, whether or not one of us thinks that there needs to be some deeper underpinning there, if you and me agree that logic exists, then necessarily this question is not a worldview issue. This follows logically. So unless your worldview does not account for logic, which would be quite the feat, then it doesn't matter where we're coming from. This is just a simple yes or no answer.
Yeah.
Well, logic is only something in and of itself, an abstraction. It doesn't stand.
You dodged again. Try again, buddy. Are you afraid to answer the question?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. Then answer the question.
It's dependent upon.
Do you want me to ask you again? Yes or no?
If you will
is it possible that a God could exist?
Explain.
Oh, go ahead.
If you let me explain. I can explain to you why. It's in a worldview context because.
Yeah, that's a dodge again. Yes or no? Say yes or no, and then I'll let you answer. Yes or no?
Okay. Are you going to let me answer the question?
If you.
Because it seems.
Okay. I'll make you a deal, Tonloc. I'll make you a deal. I will shut up, and here's what's going to happen. If instead of answering the question, you are going to seek to invalidate us because you don't think we can reason without the existence of your God, that is a dodge. And if you do that dodge, if you do that little dance, I will hang up on you. So please answer the question like you were going to. Does there exist a possible universe where God does not exist? Is that even conceivable?
Well,
yes or no?
I'm answering the question in the consistency of my worldview, so you're just going to have to hang up on me because that's something
okay.
I'm going to get.
Cool. Thank you for saving us time. You're going to have to hang up on me because all I'm going to do is seek to invalidate you and anything you have to say.
Yeah, how on earth are you going to have a good conversation if you're not willing to find that common ground? It sounds like he called in and he was like, you know what? We just need to find common ground. We need to define things in a way that we both can agree on. Mm-hmm. Cool. In theory, we're on the same page. But if you're not going to budge from what your worldview will let you answer, then that's kind of the end of the game. Like, we can't go any further with that.
But we tried, and it's not a problem with you. It's a problem with your argument.
Damn, we got a couple precepts today.
We did, and that's okay. But
that is okay, because they're fun.
I really enjoy it.
It's like hungry, hungry hippos.
All right.